In the last episode I was talking about how I'm going to mount these beams. So at the moment I've drilled 4 holes and I've bolted the beam to the cross beam, to the steel cross beam in the bilge. And that's given a really solid platform. Eventually I'm going to put 2 more here as well, but this is just a dry fit. So what I'll do is I'll dry fit all the 3 beams and take them off, and then I've got to do a little bit more tidying up on the steel and put another coat of epoxy on it. And once I've got the epoxy on, then I can lute, what I was saying on the last episode is I'll lute the timbers wherever they're going to go against the steel. Nice thin coat of luting or of sealant. Bed the beams on and that'll stop squeaking. So at the moment you can there's a little bit of a squeak. So I want to completely avoid that by putting a bit of sealant in there, and that should never squeak because I do not want this floor to squeak. It'll drive me bananas. So yeah, that's what I'm doing at the moment. I'm going to now level the beams in the mid and forward end, and that'll be a nice strong set of beams for the floor, and then we can go ahead and bolt these down as well. I'm using this sail batten because it's very straight and quite strong, and that's pretty good. It's probably 1/4 of a mil too low on this one, but I think that's okay. The other side looks pretty good too as well. So I'm pretty happy with the floor beams. They're pretty level. I'm pretty happy with them. They're very, very strong, and they're going to give a really good support to the cabin sole. Now, what I'm going to do next, I'm actually not going to put a floor in because I want to put the bulkheads in first, or at least the forward bulkhead, because the front of the saloon or the cabin sole needs to sit down on a cleat at the very forward end. So basically I need to put in some battens, insulation, and then some plywood on top of that, and that'll serve as my kind of sides to my berths as well. The reason I'm putting insulation in on the forward bulkhead is to help with noise and keep the forward cabin, separate to the saloon. Especially at the moment, it's quite cold because this is a steel bulkhead and it's letting a lot of heat out of my bedroom. So basically, yeah, I'm going to put the forward bulkhead in, and then I can put my cabin sole down, and I'll know where my berths need to be, so I can put all of my timbers in for that. But I hope I'm making sense. I kind of drew a bit of a rough diagram of the starboard side and how I want that to look, so you can kind of see in the diagram where I'm going to put the stove and all that kind of stuff. So that's the idea of how I want it to look. It's a bit crude, but it makes sense to me. So yeah, that's what I'm going to do next. So you remember when I was saying that boats are difficult to build because nothing's square? Well, that's actually doubly more so with steel boats. So bring your attention to the rear beam there. You see the gap? It's like 1/4 of an inch gap where it's glued to the top and the bottom, completely square. Then it bows in all the way up to the top. And that's because when you weld steel, it buckles just because of heat, but it's not a big deal. But I am going to leave the gap. I might pack it with some wedges or something before I put the top back on, just to help it support it. But I'm going to bolt it the bottom at the top and in the middle, and the same with the forward beam here, and that'll add quite a lot of strength. Yeah. So this forward bulkhead on the starboard side now has battens and it's got some insulation on it. I'm going to do the same on the port side of the bulkhead, but for now I just wanted to get this side done so I could see how the floor sat against it. And it sits really nice. I actually shot that bit of the video about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, and I broke my camera since then, so I'm using another one now. Took me a couple of weeks to get another one. So since then I've also been starting to put the battens on the hull. I'm using a Sikaflex to stick that to the hull. It's incredibly strong, so I'm not worried about it coming away from the hull. And once it's foamed in as well, there'll also be pretty strong base for the interior. A lot of the load bearing is taken by the bulkheads as well, so I'm not concerned. On this side we'll have a berth. We're a very, very short berth. We're in just a seat. And then we'll have the stove next to that. So the next step then is to put the bulkhead on the front. And here's one I made earlier. So basically did the same thing as I did for the midship bulkhead. I made a template from the edges and I've kind of made it fit. So it sits kind of nicely in here. Yeah, like that. And it's going to actually be flush up against this doorway, and then I can put a trim on it. Once that's together and painted, that'll look nice. And then my bunk on my seat on the starboard side, there'll be a cleat here and there, and then the bunk can go in there. So that's looking pretty cool. I've also been doing a bit on the floor, so this is actually how the floor is going to be when it's done. I started making it in 12mm, but I realised it's actually way too thin and there's a little bit of a spring in it. I could put some intermediate beams in as well, but I'd rather have the thicker floor and potentially the intermediate beams if I need them. So this is where the floor is going to sit, and I'm going to have the centre section of the bilge removable, or the centre section of the floor removable, so I can get to the bilge, and that'll actually let me get to all areas of the bilge. The next stage is really here to get the bilge painted. I'm going to paint the bilge white, seal all these floor timbers, seal all the holes that I drilled in them for the bolts, so things like that, and then get a big kind of sheet of 18mm ply and do all the edges of that. I am planning on epoxying the edges of all of the bulkheads on the front and the midships as well. And the whole reason that I was actually putting the floor in first was so that I could put the bulkhead on top of it and get all of my my dimensions correct. I do need to trim this bulkhead back a bit. It's a little bit too wide here and I need to put a piece in there. But that's coming along really nicely. I need to do the same on the other side for the other bulkhead. But if we have a little bit of a better look at the timbers for the interior, they are seeked in, as I said. Very, very, very strong. Yeah, I'm doing the same on the overhead. So that's coming along slowly as well. It's coming along though. So for fear of talking too much, I'm going to stop talking and try and get some more work done. But a lot of the reason that I've been going so slowly is I've been doing my Yachtmaster as well. And my day job is after getting very busy at the moment, but hopefully that'll calm down again over Christmas. But things are progressing and we're getting there. Yeah, you can very easily underestimate how long these things take, because they take at least 3 times longer than you expect, at least. Sorry for the noise, it's very, very windy. My rigging is like singing a song, but this is the conduit I'm planning on using for the interior wiring. I'm hoping to run it up by the deck hole joint up here. There's a few natural runs for it that I can put kind of a cover over to hide it. I might need to drill a hole here that'll take the Copex, but I'm not too worried. And I'll have to drill a hole in the forward bulkhead too. You can kind of see it's running through that kind of natural hole there as well, that I don't need to drill any holes. And then looking back through, kind of goes all the way through. So I might be able to do something with that. It'd be pretty sweet. The only other option really is to run it kind of down here. So the insulation, so the water line is about here. I'm going to bring the insulation down to around here. So it'll cover this this transverse here, and then what I'll do is I will foam it up to here. And this is just going to be painted give it a freshen up, and I'll drill some limber holes here as well. That'll let the condensation run into the bilge if we ever get condensation here. We shouldn't, because it's below the water line. So unless the water I'm in somewhere really, really cold, we shouldn't suffer from condensation down there. But yeah, we could run the conduit down low, but it's not really a very, I don't know, doesn't seem to be a very wise thing to do. I will have to run some wiring down here, obviously, for the bilge pumps, and anything down there and stuff, but to be honest, I think that I'll run the conduit up this high, and if I can't, I might have to consider that. But yeah, the more I read about doing wiring, the more it's kind of like you just have to kind of figure it out as you go along. I mean, where you run things, not the actual wiring itself. I think we can all agree that Niamh made a very, very nice job of the forward cabin. It's very well organised now and cosy. And just want to jump in there and go to sleep. On this side we have a coat rack. On the other side we just have kind of bookshelf storage. I've got my heater and some nice fairy lights for ambience. So Niamh did all this when I was fluting around in the saloon. And now it's all cosy. Somewhere to sleep.